The ANC's National Executive Committee has been mulling over some policy changes recently, and reportedly on the table are economic policy proposals, including an idea that farmers be asked to donate land to black emerging farmers. The party also looking at which state-owned entities to keep, merge or privatise. Well, the former Statistician General says the back and forth on economic policy, what he calls the merry-go-round, is a concern. Dr. Pali Lehohla is now Professor of Practice at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you for being with us, as always, Doctor. You go as far as saying that economic policy is like a toy for South Africa, which is changed every 3 years or so. Tell us how you really feel.
Well, let me say that there is a census running which ended yesterday. I'm dressed this way so that we should keep our eyes on the census led by State SA. There is, I think, still an opening for those who go online. So I'm supporting that call for the census. But
thank you.
Because, amongst other things, it solves the problems that we are facing. So, yes, I term this a toy for the nation every 3 years. If you look from the days of RDP into GEAR, it was GISA, into 9-point plan, which mutated into 14-point plan, into the new economic something, and then the new growth path into the recovery, that was the Treasury document of the 19th of August 2019, and then of course the economic recovery and reconstruction which comes now. It's 8 things, more than 8 things in 28 years. That's about three programs that are significant, with a significant announcement in 28 years. And that's a toy for the nation every 3 years. There is no country that is serious about planning that would give you those kinds of things in a space of 28 years.
Yeah, and it's heard over and over again. Yeah, where's the implementation? I mean, looking at the economic recovery and recovery and reconstruction plan, the recent COVID-19 one, it was launched with so much fanfare, Doctor, and it seems like it hasn't been spoken about much in the media. Maybe we should really hold government accountable for those targets. But government also doesn't even mention it. It doesn't even mention it.
There were never targets. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
In that plan, in that so-called plan, and that's the first weakness. There was no roadmap towards achieving that. Neither was then an implementation plan for that, and that is the weakness that has affected us throughout these many things that are called plans, which have no semblance of a plan. In my book, they don't, because a plan requires targets, a planning system, the plan itself in terms of what are the interlocking policies and how will they interlock to derive a certain outcome. And once it is 3-year cycles, that's a budgeting plan. It is not a plan for development. Yeah. Plan for development stretches for almost 30 years or so. The NDP started as a statement, policy statement, 360 pages of policy statement, without any sense of planning. To have a plan, you have to have modeling capability. And the modeling capability of 3-year cycles, that is done by Treasury, is not a planning thing. It's just budgeting. It's a budgeting cycle, mindful of the financial systems in the world.
Yeah.
Not about the demands and requirements of South Africans, but how the markets respond. So that's my opening B.
Some have said, you know, the NDP was good enough. Why didn't we at least stick to that plan? But you're saying it lacked sort of the follow through on how it would happen. So not even that is a benchmark for you.
No, it isn't a plan. It was something that says let's reduce unemployment to 15%, to 12%. Let's grow at 6%. Let's ensure that education works. Those are statements. Those are not plans. A plan is something that you model for the future and say, how will South Africa, given that we want South Africa to look like in this way, by 2030, the plan then says, what are the set of policies that we put together? And then you also put proof of concept. And the proof of concept having not reached the destination, is modeling. You model the future and look at options and say, if these are the options, this is the option I'll follow. And that's where scenarios become very important. And those scenarios have to be quantified. The NDP was one scenario. It never had any other scenario. It was one scenario. And you need other scenarios so that they inform you when you veer from the path. The NDP was one scenario. Once a plan or something that has one scenario, it's not a plan. It doesn't tell you when you veer what will happen.
So, because the wheel keeps on being reinvented, as it were, and these economic proposals are put forward every few years, people blame that for a lack of investment, the policy uncertainty. But the ANC says, look, it's good to debate. That's how the party has always developed policy. You have to have back and forth. You have to have different ideas and contestation. How do you find a balance?
Well, it's good to debate. And in fact, it's good to debate around scenarios. And then on the basis of those scenarios, we quantify them through an econometric model, and then look at which options you can take. And within each set of those, you look at other options. There is nothing like that on the table. There's nothing that says, if we did the following, unemployment will drop to 15%. And then let's follow through. I mean, when business approached the government 2 years ago with its so-called plan, which was not a plan either, it had targets, and reasonable targets, very attractive targets. Unemployment dropping to 15%, growth coming to 5%, GDP growth at some point, it didn't have the targets in terms of time, but it said it is possible to grow the economy of South Africa to 800 billion, which means trillion, which means the economy of South Africa would double. Now, that, I thought, was something that we should have held the private sector to, with government, lock the doors, throw away the key, agree on how we reach those attractive targets. Gini coefficient at 43%. Now, the roadmap to that would actually talk to what set of policies should be on the table. What we see now on the table is a privatization process, which, of course, private sector will go to town smiling.
Well, that leads me to my final question. Don't we have a de facto policy of privatisation, as you say? I mean, the ministers seem to take the side of unions when it came to SAA, but we have a consortium that has taken a 51% stake. That's privatisation. You say we're in fact going all the way back to gear, and the idea there was that you'd have growth and environment for business. The growth would trickle down. It never did. But what do you feel about where we are now, de facto, in terms of privatization?
Well, Noam Chomsky says, defund it. Things don't work, people get angry, and then privatize it. Now, reflect of what has happened yesterday at the stadium with the labor unions, reflect of what is happening in South Africa. Things have been defunded, people have gotten angry, then the solution is privatizing. This is exactly what we are doing, and we think that trickle-down economies work. Under ASGISA, South Africa grew, albeit for 4 years. And I'm not sure why we are not going to ASGISA and unpack it and say, what was informing ASGISA in South Africa? Because GEAR was about growth, employment, and redistribution. Growth didn't occur, employment didn't occur under GEAR. It was only under ASGISA that growth occurred, the economy grew, unemployment dropped, from 29% to 22%, still high, but there was something that happened that was right under ASGISA. Business didn't come to the party at the time. So when business comes to the party, we need to go back to ASGISA and say, what was it in ASGISA? And what we know is that it was a very strongly government-led program.
All right, Doctor, we have to end it there, but I hope we can chat about ASGISA again. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Pali Lehohla, former Statistician General and now Professor of Practice at the University of Johannesburg.